Okay, welcome back everyone to Parsha Insights, Parshat Beshalach, the Shabbat of song, the Shabbat of the crossing of the sea. It's an action-packed parsha, and we have a very interesting approach to this parasha that we're going to take a look at one line in particular, and in the style of Rav Moshe Shapiro, we're going to take a deep dive into some of the concepts that stand behind that line. So let's jump right in. Here we go. Mirror image. That's what we're talking about today. We'll get there. Don't worry. You'll keep that theme in mind, and we'll come back to what that means in just a little bit. And God said to Moses, this is going back in the story before the plagues. This is after the staff turns into a snake. Go to Pharaoh in the morning, right, taking with the rod that turned into this day, and say to him in verse 16, Va'amarta elav, Hashem Elokei ha'ivrim, shlachani elecha. Who has sent me to you? God, Elokei ha'ivrim, the God of, I translated this in a very lazy way, as many do, the God of the Hebrews.
Right.
What does Hebrew mean? Hebrew is just a transliteration of this word, Ivri. Ivri, Hebrew. That's it. That's what Hebrew is. The Hebrew word for Hebrew is Ivrit. Great. So, but what does it mean to be a God of the Ivrim? What in the world does that mean? And they sent me to say, let my people go, but you have paid no heed until now, and so on. Okay, but we're being introduced to God being the God of the Hebrews. So let's go to the Midrash. The Midrash says, why lama koreotam ivrim? Why are the Jewish people called the Ivrim, the Hebrews? Al shum she'avru yam, because they crossed the sea. Al shum, which is the same as al shem, by virtue of the name, of the sake, she'avru yam, that they crossed the sea. See that word? Avru means to cross, and the word ivrim, same shoresh. So it must be that this word ivrim, Hebrews, is connected to the crossing of the sea, which means that the crossing of the sea, as we're going to read in this week's Torah portion, is a seminal moment in the history of the Jewish people, which means that our identity is connected to the crossing of the sea. But why? What is it about the crossing of the sea that speaks to the core of our identity in such a profound and important way?
We had this before. We had Avraham HaIvri, that he was on one side and everybody else was on the other side.
Exactly.
And that also discovers our mahut, our character, whatever it's called in English.
Exactly. And we'll circle back to Avraham as well, because he is also called Ivri, and there are a number of different approaches to Ivri. But our focus for this week is really going to be on this week's parasha, which is the crossing of the sea. And therefore, the one translation I saw which took this word Ivri. So how would you translate? So let me ask you, based on this understanding that we have now, that we're called Ivrim because of the experience at the sea, how would you translate Ivrim? God, the God of the
people who crossed.
Say the crossers, right? Is that what I heard? The people who crossed.
Right.
God, the God of the people who of the crossers. I guess that would be one way to describe. We're the ones who crossed. Okay, yeah, Esther.
Thinking if we turn around Ivrim, the Av, and the three middle letters, or they're not quite in the middle, it becomes something to teach. Rabba, teacher?
A teacher, like a
people who teach.
Yeah.
People who teach.
That could certainly be. We could certainly take this apart and find some other words in there. The ayin is going to be a core letter that we can't really ignore so easily in the Hebrew language. So we'll keep it at that. It's a good suggestion. We'll keep it at that. In the book of Jonah, we also remember how Jonah says, Ivri Anochi. I am an Ivri. They say, where have you come from? he describes himself as an Ivri. And what does that mean? I am an Ivri. I worship God, the God of the heaven, who made both sea and land. Do you see that connection between sea and land and Ivri? Et hayam, yam is the sea, and yabasha is land. So what's the connection here? Interestingly, anecdotally, the word yam, and Rav Moshe Shapiro writes this in different places, that all of the Hebrew words that have to do with, well, let's talk about them. Hebrew words that have to do with bodies of water. Do you know how you say a river?
Nar. Nar.
Nahar, exactly. Nahar. Do you know what else Nahar can mean? Nahor, Nahar. It can mean light, a ray of light. Another.
Naharu elav kol goyim.
I'm sorry?
Naharu elav kol hagoyim.
Exactly. To stream. It means to stream. But the idea also of light can be part of that. Also, another word the Torah uses for a river is Yaor. Remember that from the Exodus, from throwing the babies into Yaor. Yaor is connected to the Hebrew word for or, light. Also, the word for sea, yam. Do you see any light-related words in there? Okay, I'll give you the word yom, day.
Well,
What about the connection between yom and yam, between day and sea? All water, I shouldn't say all, but many water-related terms are connected to the concept of light. Light and water.
You're getting rid of the olive, just like you didn't want her to get rid of the ayin for Ivri, so that's kind of dicey.
No, wait, I'm getting rid of the olive where? In
Yaor for yom. Yom.
Yom, I'm getting rid of the vav in Yom. Yeah, vavs and olives are a little bit easier to get rid of than ayins, but yes, your point is well taken.
No,
Okay.
not the vav I'm worried about, more the olives than the vav.
In what?
Like from Yaor to yom, because like a dot can replace a vav, but you can't replace an olive.
Yaor, the word Yaor, the connection was to the Hebrew word or, which is light, not to
Right.
Yom. Yom was Yom. Okay, let's go. Let's keep going. We must devote our minds to try to understand the unique aspect of this miracle that caused it to establish a new name for the Jewish people, meaning Ivrim. If we're making the connection between Ivrim, Hebrews, and crossing, then that's going to reflect a part of our nature. It's beyond all other miracles and events, none of which granted us a new name. The implication is that this miracle characterizes us. It became our very name. By crossing the sea, we were established as another essence of being. So what happened at the crossing of the sea? That's going to be our journey today. And so we're going to start by looking at the Song of the Sea. And we're looking at the very end of the Song of the Sea, which is in this week's Torah portion. And if you look, we're going to look on the left-hand side in the English, and then we're going to look at the Hebrew. So the English, terror and dread descend upon them, though the might of your arm, they are still as stone, till your people cross over, right? Ya'avor, remember that word, right? The Ivri from the same word, Ya'avor, to cross over, till your people cross, whom you ransomed. You will bring them and plant them in your own mountain, the place you made to dwell in God, the sanctuary, O my Lord, which your hand established. Hashem, God, will reign forever and ever. Period. Hashem yimloch leolam va'ed. God will reign forever and ever. Song over. What a beautiful song. And then there's this verse 19, which is a curious verse. For the horses of Pharaoh with his chariots and riders went into the sea, and God turned back on them the waters of the sea, but the Israelites marched on dry ground in the midst of the sea. That's it. So to characterize this verse 19, it's not a song. It's like a historical encapsulation. It's a recounting. It's a narrative. It's just an extra verse there that's giving us a little bit of historical context. Why are we singing all this? We're singing it because Pharaoh and his chariots drowned in the sea, and the Israelites marched through on dry land. Okay, that makes makes a good deal of sense. The problem is that the style of verse 19, and if you can look over here on the right-hand side in the Hebrew, you'll see, look at how that verse is written. It's written like what? Like the poetry. Do you see the breaks here and the spaces? It's written in a poetic form. And this is actually contained within the structure of the Torah. The Talmud describes it as all of the songs in the Bible are written in the form of a half brick arranged upon a whole brick and a whole brick arranged upon a half brick. That was the Talmudic way of describing how the lines are structured. And here's I'm a visual learner. Here's an example. This is the Song at the Sea. Do you see here's the whole brick right there? And I don't know if you can see. Can you see where my cursor is? Can you?
Yes.
So you can see that Ashira Hashem Kiga, that's the whole brick. And then you have a half brick over here and a half brick over here and a whole brick and a half brick and a half, right? So it's written in that format. And the problem, and that clearly, if you open up a Torah scroll, this is what you'll see. And you'll see exactly what is poetry and what is not poetry. And going back, verse 19 from the structure of the Torah scroll is clearly poetry. For the horses of Pharaoh with chariots and riders went into the sea, and God turned back on them the waters of the sea, but the Israelites marched on dry ground in the midst of the sea. So that narrative phrase is part of the song. And so Moshe Shapiro is going to present to us the question that the commentators ask. It's not his question. The implication is that verse 19 is part of the song, but it's unclear why, since it's only relating events. It's not a song. God, thank you this, thank you that. It's just saying, God brought us dry land in the midst of the sea. Why is that part of the song? So the Ibn Ezra, or I should say Nachmanides, quoting Ibn Ezra, but Nachmanides offers so let's start with Ibn Ezra, and Nachmanides will offer a response to this. So the Ibn Ezra says, based on this verse, he says, Lafi da'ati, according to my opinion, Gamze pasuk mehashir. This verse is also part of the song, Lahazkir hapele, she'asa betoch pele kasher perashti, to mention hapele betoch pele. A miracle within a miracle, a wonder within a wonder. There's something else happening here. There's a miracle within a miracle. There's a structure of a miracle, and if you look even closer, there's a further miracle in there. Nachmanides explains a little bit more. Nachmanides calls it nes betoch nes. You can see I underline that. He says, Rabbi Avraham, referring to the Ibn Ezra, Rabbi Avraham said, the acronym says Rabbi Avraham, Shagam zemin ashira kayu mishorim omrim, because the ones who sang it, they actually sang, for the horses of Pharaoh went in with his chariots and with his horsemen into the sea, and the Eternal brought back the waters of the sea upon them. This being, we're walking on dry land in the midst of the sea, Hochim bayabasha betoch hayam, v'hu nes betoch nes. So we're being given this idea to explain this description of, what was the miracle, right? Let's take a step back. What was the miracle? So I would say, on a very simple term, the miracle was the splitting of the sea, period. That was the miracle. The sea split, the children of Israel walked through, and then it came crashing down on the Egyptians, miracle over. Sound right? That's the miracle. But they're introducing something else and saying, no. There was a miracle within that miracle. And the miracle within that miracle was something extraordinary. Let's look at Rav Moshe Shapiro says. He says, there's a unique song for the miracle within a miracle that took place at the splitting of the sea. While the sea was being turned back over the Egyptians, and despite this, we walked on land in the midst of the sea, meaning it's happening at the same time. There's sea and there's land. It was not two separate places, it was one place. The very same place that was a sea for our pursuers was land for us. This is a miracle within a miracle. At the end of the road, after all is said and done, there is special mention of a unique wonder. The children of Israel walked on land in the midst of the sea, which was a miracle within a miracle. Meaning, it's not just about crossing from one side of the sea to the other side. It's not just about the splitting of the waters. There's something else that's happening in that at the same time that the Egyptians are drowning in the sea, the children of Israel are walking on dry land. This is where we're about to get a stress fracture in our brains. This is so difficult to think about because we have to think about two contradictory realities that are taking place at the same time, that are concomitant, that there's sea and Egyptians drowning, and there's Israelites walking on dry land, and it's happening in the same moment. The sea split, yes, but also as the Egyptians are drowning, the sea is still split for the children of Israel. How can you have these two different realities taking place at the same time? How is that possible? So they say that's the miracle within the miracle. And now we're about to take a step back and say, wait a second, this is a very special thought, but that's a lovely thought for thousands of years ago. That's a lovely thought for what happened in that's a lovely thought for what happened in the time of the Exodus. But how about what's happening now to our lives, for us? How about that? And so the answer is going to be that no, this reality is really about us, and this reality is about our own existence. Our existence is paradoxical and impossible. The fact that miracles happen to us is insufficient to express the wonder of our existence. Miracles occur within, I love this description he's going to give of miracles. Miracles occur within the natural realm. Something opposes our existence, and the Creator performs miracles for us and saves us from it. But that our very existence should be within a miraculous realm and not integrated with the natural realm is beyond the standard classification of miracles. You can take this and read it over 20 times after class, and we're going to go through it, and we're going to make our way through it. But he's describing the nature of miracles, which requires a meditation, because throughout history, what he's referring to is like what we say in the Passover Haggadah, that b'chol dor v'dor, in every generation, they stand against us to annihilate us. The natural way of the world, the natural order of the world is that our existence should stop. If you look at, just look at the trajectories of history, look at what we've had to confront. And when we turn to God, we say yet again, something opposes our existence. And the Creator performs miracles and saves us, but that our very existence should be within a miraculous realm and not integrated with the natural realm is beyond the standard classification of miracles. In our minds, a miracle means being rescued in a given situation. We live in a dangerous world, there's hostility, and in this concept of miracles, each rescue is deemed another miracle. God performed a miracle at the sea, God performed a miracle at Hanukkah, God performed a miracle at Purim, God performed a miracle in the state of Israel, God performed one miracle after another. And he said, but that's not it. But not upon such a miracle do we exist. Rather, the very basis of our existence is miraculous. We exist in a realm that has no place for us altogether. This means that from the aspect of the realm that we live in, we do not exist, but we nonetheless exist. What he is saying, I've given a lot of thought as to how to explain it, but I think the splitting of the sea is the best way to explain it. That our existence is in the sea. We are swimming in the sea, but we're not swimming. We're walking in the sea. And as he'll say in other places, and we may get to it here, as he'll say, human existence is not supposed to happen in the sea. Jewish existence, we are not supposed to exist. The fact that we exist means that our very existence is a miracle. We are in inhospitable waters. We're in the sea. God is creating a miracle within a miracle. Not only is God splitting the sea and saving us and drowning the enemies and making sure that we survive, but our very existence is as if we are walking on dry land while being in the sea at the same time. Everyone else is swimming, and we're walking on dry land. That's the existence, that's the miraculous existence of the children of Israel. I don't know if I can explain this any better. I don't know that I fully comprehend it, but it's a very powerful, for me, it's a very powerful image of taking that miracle of the children of Israel on dry land in the sea. How can you be on dry land and in the sea at the same time? That's what the Jewish people do. That's our existence in a sea that should not allow for us to live. And yet here we are. What was the splitting of the sea? The sea is not a place for human existence. But at the splitting of the sea, a place was created for us in the sea. Now there are two options. The sea could split, causing the place to cease being the sea. That's one option, is you could say, how can we survive in the sea? Well, it's no longer a sea because the sea split. So it's no longer called a sea. That would be a one-time miracle. And now we would have a place because the sea split and it's accessible to anyone in the world. True, it became a place miraculously. The reason it became dry land was because God created this miracle. The sea had split, but now, just like any other place in the world. But that's not what happened. The place remained the sea, and there itself a form of existence was established for us exclusively. We were existing in a parallel form, in a parallel sense. There's still a sea, and people are drowning in the sea. And yet for us, we're walking through as if it's dry land. How is that possible? That's the miracle. Our form of existence is within a realm that considers our existence impossible, like the sea. And to reiterate, that means from its aspect, we do not exist. The ones drowning in the sea, swimming in the sea, trying to survive in the sea, to them, we don't exist. There's no existence in the sea. If someone exists there, it must not be the sea, but a form of land. A place that is integrally a sea cannot sustain any human existence. It's a place of existence only for us. This fearsome mystery is the miracle within a miracle that was revealed at the splitting of the sea. To exist miraculously in a system where existence is impossible is a miracle within a miracle. Again, the miracle, splitting of the sea. Shkayach, well done, good miracle. But is that it? Is that all there is to a miracle? So comes the Ibn Ezra and comes Nachmanides and says there's an additional element to the miracle. And this is what they were singing about in that very last verse, which looked like a narrative, but actually was a song of praise that God, not only did you split the sea, not only did you drown the Egyptians, not only did you allow us to live, but you gave us the ability to walk in the sea. That's the miracle. That's the miracle of existence, where existence is impossible. Is it possible to walk in the sea? Is it possible to live in the sea? Impossible. And yet here we are, walking in the sea on dry land. That's the miracle within a miracle. Okay, we've been spending a lot of time with the sea. We're going to take a step back. As was mentioned before, by the way, Avram is called Ivri also, the Hebrew. Avram HaIvri, and there's a fascinating midrash who said, why is Avram called Ivri? Three opinions. Rabbi Yehuda says, Kol ha'olam kulo me'ever echad. The word ever, remember we said it means to cross, so it can also mean one bank or one side. So the entire world is on one side, v'hu me'ever echad, and he is on the other side, the other bank. Another opinion, Rabbi Nehemiah Amar, Shehu mi bnei banav shel Ever. He is a descendant of Ever, one of the early humans. V'Rabbanan Amrei Shehu me Ever hanahar, because he's from the other side of the sea. Shehu mesiach bilshon Ivri, because he speaks Hebrew. He speaks the language of the Hebrew, means from the other side. You speak a foreign language. So these are three opinions. The most classic opinion, the one that's quoted by Rashi, is that the entire world was from one side and Abraham was from the other side, was on the other bank. Does this sound like a familiar idea? Because this is exactly what we've been talking about. The entire world has one experience, and Abraham had another experience. For the entire world, it's sea, but for Abraham, it's dry land. He exists in a place that's opposite them. It's a different place. Wherever the rest of the world is, he is on the other side, and we're his descendants. This is what happened to us in the splitting of the sea. We became crossers, Ivrim. We crossed the river, we crossed the Sea of Reeds. We crossed to a place that's inherently on the other side, and in other words, to a place where no one else has reached, where no one else can reach. That's our place in the world. Is we're not having the experience that everyone else is having, and others aren't having our experience. And now that we've crossed the rivers and crossed the seas, we're going to take a moment, stretch our necks, and look up, because we're going into the clouds now. Any questions before we go to the clouds? Okay, I take it everything is clear.
Can I just interject that I hate to put rain on your parade, but I was always taught that the Ivrim comes from crossing the river, crossing the Tigris, the Euphrates. That's what Abraham called himself, and that's where it comes from, not from the Yam.
That's so. Yeah, we're talking about the question is, why is Abraham called the Ivri? And there are two different opinions. Now, later we're going to hear that this name, I mean, that's good for Avram, but now we're going to hear that this name generations later is referring, God is referring to himself as the God of the Ivrim. Who are these Ivrim? Did they cross the river like Abraham? So there are different opinions at that point which say, well, that refers to the crossing of the sea. But you're right, Avram's name has one source, and the Israelites' name has another source, and what Moshe Shapiro is putting it all together and saying, you know what this is about? This is about being on the other side. Whether you're talking about a river, whether you're talking about opinions or whatever it is, whether you're talking about the sea and being in the sea, either way, when we call somebody an Ivri, we're saying that they are having a different experience in life, in the world, than others are having. They are on dry land in the midst of the sea.
All right.
That's the common denominator. So let's go to the clouds now. Pillar of cloud. V'Hashem holech lifnehem yomam be'amud anan lanchotam haderech. God goes before them in a pillar of cloud. Amud anan, the pillar of the cloud, lanchotam haderech, to show them the way. V'laila ba'amud eish, and at night there was this pillar of fire. Laha'ir lahem, to illuminate for them. Lalechet yomam v'laila, to go day and night. So we're going to focus on the cloud, on the anan, ba'amud anan, on the pillar of cloud. And the purpose of the cloud is to show them the way, to give them direction. Lamentations, what's the point of a cloud? Sakota ve'anan lach me'avor tefillah. You have screened yourself off with a cloud, that no prayer may pass through. The function of a cloud is to cover. And as Rav Moshe Shapiro says, a cloud obscures, it conceals, it covers. And this is how it's employed in all language. When we talk about clouding over, something gets cloudy, it's something that you can't see as well. It's covering. In Hebrew, by the way, it's called anan. It was also another word for a cloud is av, which literally means thickness. And thickness obscures and covers. And apparently, the pillar of cloud came to make it dark. But why was it necessary? Moreover, it's well known for the sages and implied in the verses that the pillar of cloud didn't come to make it dark, but to provide light, not to darken. And look at this midrash. Kol arba'im shana shayu Yisrael b'midbar, for all 40 years that the Israelites were in the wilderness. Lo nitzrach echad mehem lo la'or chama bayom v'lo la'or levan b'layla. Is a midrash that none of the Israelites actually needed the light of the sun during the day or the light of the moon at night. It wasn't necessary. Why? Because they had these pillars, the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire. They would know by the by the colors, by the illumination, and by the radiance, they would know whether the sun was up or sun was down, whether it was night or day, but they didn't need it. It wasn't necessary. Why? Because they had this light because they had the pillars and they gave them light. Umistakel b'chaviyot. Do you want to know how brilliant the light was? The Midrash says how brilliant the light in the wilderness was. It was unlike any light that we know or that we're familiar with. Mistakel b'chaviyot, because you would look in a chavit, in the jars. You would look in jars for storage. V'yodea ma shebetocho. And you would know what was inside. You wouldn't even have to open the cover. That's how brilliant the light was. Is it made things that were opaque and impenetrable, it made them transparent, right? Mipnei anan hashchina shebeneim. All of this was because of the cloud of the Shekhinah, of the divine presence that was amongst them. So this cloud seems to darken and provide light at the same time. What's happening? So Rav Moshe Shapiro says, it revealed things as they truly are. It prevented, removed, illuminated all concealment. Why then is the meaning of its very name the pillar of cloud when the concept of a cloud is darkness? Right? So I'm very confused about this cloud. It's something that illuminates according to our sages. So why is it a cloud? What's happening here? The pillar of cloud shifted from in front of them and took up place behind them as it came between the army of the Egyptians and the army of Israel. Thus, there was the cloud with the darkness, and it cast a spell upon the night so that one could not come near the other all through the night. Look what the Yalkut Shimoni says. What was the nature of what was happening with the cloud of darkness, that it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of the Israelites? Magid HaKatuv. So what the verse is teaching us, Shahayu Yisrael ba'ora, that Israel had light, umitzrayim ba'afela, and the Egyptians had darkness. That's the cloud, the nature of the cloud. Does this sound like a familiar theme? Dry land, sea, light, darkness. V'chein b'mitzrayim lo ra'u ishet achiv. We talk also in the plague of darkness that they didn't see each other. V'chein atamotze la'atid lavo. We also see in prophecies about the coming times. Kumi uri, come my light, illuminate my light. Kiva orech, because your light has come. We're talking about this divine light. V'lo od, and that's not it. That's not all. Ela kol shehu natun ba'afela, whatever is in darkness, ro'eh ma shehu natun ba'ora, can see whatever is in the light. Think about, just think about our windows at night. When you're inside in an illuminated house, you can't see outside into the darkness. But when you're outside in the darkness, you can see inside quite well. When you're in darkness, the Midrash says, you see the light. Mitzrayim, so the Egyptians, Shahayu netunim ba'afela, who were in the darkness, Ro'im et Israel netunim ba'ora, they could see the Israelites. That was part of the plague of darkness, was that they had to look around and see others who were not being punished in the way that they were. Ochlim v'shotim v'smeichim, they saw them eating and drinking and celebrating because they were about to be redeemed. Okay, v'hayu mezarkim b'hen chitzim. This is a fantastic midrash that the Egyptians in the darkness were sending arrows, were shooting arrows at the Israelites. V'avnei b'listarot, and also and stones at the Israelites because they could see them very well. V'ha'anan magen alehem, and there are different versions of what this should say, but the cloud basically protected them. The cloud that was dividing, separating between them, was casting darkness on one side and light on the other, and was protecting between them. Yes, Peter, did you have a question? Were you raising your hand?
I do. Your explanations about the contrast, the obvious contrast, are done within the context of Peshat.
Yes.
But I suspect land, water, darkness, light, clouds have metaphorical and mystical connotations as well. Have you considered using the framework of the four levels of interpretation to somehow resolve what seems to be, in the context of Peshat, something which is clearly not evident. Not to say it's a bald contradiction. So there's got to be an explanation beyond the literal translation of the concept.
Oh, which concept in particular are you talking about? What is the shot that we're dealing?
Being in water and on dry land at the same time, being in darkness and light. Your explanation of being inside a lit room looking out, etc., is perfectly logical, but I can't believe that that's where it ends.
So I don't think that is the pshat of the verse. I think that the children of Israel were walking in dry land means that it was just dry land, but it wasn't at the same time that it was sea. This is already a deeply mystical explanation that we're offering, to say that something can be sea and dry land at the same time. That you can have an experience, that you can have a cloud that is casting, that is illuminating and darkening at the same time. That's not, pshat has to align with the physical world and with our understanding of the physical world. Once you move past that, once you say that there can be a cloud that can allow different people to have different experiences from the same cloud, you've already moved past the pshat. And I don't think that, if I've never read the Torah and read the Song of the Sea as describing, the splitting of the sea being a different experience for Israel. That's already midrash. That's already deep drash. And maybe we're so familiar with drash that we're familiar with these concepts that the Egyptians are in darkness, and the Israelites are illuminated from the exact same light, from the exact same experience. Not that there are different places, not that there's a storm here, but 20 kilometers away, that there's no storm. That's not what's happening here. It's that one experience is experienced in a way, and he's going to talk about this in a moment, in a polar opposite way by two different parties. But that's to say, there are many more levels that we could go through. And I have not gone through systematically to address, because there is a lot to say about all of this, about all of these beautiful teachings, in particular the Song of the Sea, which is one of those sections that just calls us in and invites us to interpret it, because clearly there's more than meets the eye. Okay, let's jump right back. It is a relationship of polar opposites. As all polar opposites, the conflict and difference is that the negative of one side is the positive of the other, and vice versa. Each is a mirror image of the other. Whatever is in one form on one side is to be an opposite form on the other side, land and sea, light and darkness. This explains the pillar of cloud. Its purpose was to provide light. But light is unfeasible without darkening the existing light, right? If you walk into a well-lit room with a candle, the candle is lost. The candle is meaningless. If you want that candle to have impact, you have to turn out the existing lights. If the existing light is perceived as light, then the other light cannot be seen. Both lights cannot exist concurrently. They are paradoxical. They are opposites. So the pillar of the Amud Anan, the pillar of the cloud, if its purpose is to give light, then it has to darken at the same time. It has to extinguish or darken the existing light in order to allow the new light to be experienced. And he quotes the Maharal in Gvurot Hashem. So this is all the Maharal Meprag, who has a whole long section in chapter 57 in which he connects the plagues with the creation. And as the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot says, that there were 10 ma'amarot, there were 10 utterances with which the world was created, and those, the Maharal writes, parallel to the 10 plagues, each of the plagues. So he talks about the plague of the firstborn corresponds to the statement of Bereshit, and the connection we see right away is first, right? Bereshit, Genesis. For a firstborn is the first of those that come after. It corresponds to the statement of Bereshit, in which it was the beginning of the creation. They are both beginnings. Just as the plague of the firstborn was equal to all other plagues, so too the statement of Bereshit was equal to all other statements. So we find in the Midrash the utterance of being revealed the true first, and the true first compels that the false first be stricken. They're in conversation with each other. If you're going to have a true first, a Bereshit, you need to extinguish the false first, which was the nature of the firstborns in Egypt and their spiritual status and religious status and all of that. You needed to extinguish that. He shows similarly the idea of choshech, of the plague of darkness, corresponds to the second statement, which is yehi or, let there be light. The revelation of true light, when God says, let there be light, that's not, according to our sages, that's not necessarily talking about the light of the sun. That's talking about the light of God. That's talking about the illumination, the spiritual illumination. And if you want to see that spiritual illumination, what do you need to do? You need to provide darkness first. You need to create a sense of contrast to allow that other light to be seen. The revelation of true light constitutes for anyone who stands against it, for anyone who's on the other side, for anyone who is the opposite. And to close with a midrash on the light of Israel and the nature of this light, of what light we're talking about as a product of the pillar of the cloud. And this is a midrash on Tehillim, on Psalm 27, which is the psalm that we say around the time of the high holy days of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, all the way to Hoshana Rabbah, David, Hashem, Ori v'ishi mimi ira. God is my light and my salvation. And so the Midrash goes on this whole exposition of what is light. And the Midrash says the following: but nohag sheba'olam, the way of the world. The word nohag comes from the Hebrew word minhag, the same connection. It's the way of the world, the custom. The word minhag means a custom, a minhag. So what's the way of the world? It's not talking about a ritual minhag. It's talking about the custom, the world's customs, the way the world operates. Adam madliket haner b'platin shelo. A person lights a candle in their home. Shema yachol lamar. Can a person say, Ploni shu ohavi yishtamesh lo ro? Can a person say, the person I like is allowed to use this light. Uploni shehu soni, but the person who's my enemy, al yishtamesh lo ro, is not permitted to use this light to see. Yeah, of course you can't do that. You can't light a candle and say its light is only available to people I like. We don't have that control. But everyone can use that candle, can use that light. But God is not like that at all. Ela v'haya or Yisrael, but rather, as the verse says, there's this concept of a light for Israel. And this was already shown and demonstrated in Egypt. All of the children of Israel, all of the Israelites had light, and at the same time, the others couldn't see one another. And it's also shown with the concept of the pillar of the clouds, that there was darkness as well. So the idea of this light is something that's controlled and something that's selected. It's not the concept of light as we're familiar with it, as just it's a light out there, whoever wants it can take it. But the concept of light, as the Torah and as the Maharal is showing us, and as Rav Moshe Shapiro is presenting to us in a beautiful way, so that there's this ability to contrast and to provide a different experience for Israel, a different experience in the Torah, as those who are walking through the sea, and that as a reflection of God's love for us. That is a reflection of being redeemed, of being saved. That is a reflection of our prayers and our cries being answered. And I think it's a very powerful representation and interpretation of what is happening in the sea and why does it matter. Again, our starting point was that one verse which seemed to be part of a song. It seemed to stand out. It didn't really belong in the song. And the commentators say, no, that what that verse is teaching us is another layer to the miracle. Because how does God provide a miracle? It's one thing to save us. It's another to provide an existence for us that in its essence is miraculous. That our ability to exist as spiritual entities and to maintain a spiritual integrity in a world that's a raging sea, an inhospitable sea around us, in which we're meant to drown. The world around us is designed for drowning, is designed for perishing. You can't exist in a way of spiritual integrity around us. It's impossible. And yet, here we are, we've been given this life, which is like dry land in the sea at the same time, while existing in the sea. So it's an amazing thing to feel wet and secure at the same time, to feel the threat of the sea, and to feel that immense power that the sea has, and at the same time, to feel the stability of dry land that's beneath us. So that's basically the presentation of Rav Moshe Shapiro, starting with that verse of narrative, showing how it fits both structurally and thematically into the concept of the song and the praise, the idea of the miracle within a miracle, speaking about our miracle, our miraculous existence, connecting that to the splitting of the sea and understanding that, connecting that further to Avram HaIvri and what it means to be in a different place, to always be in a different place than the rest of the world. It's not a geographic or a physical description, but to have a different experience than the rest of the world, and using the pillar of the cloud and using the plague of darkness as a way of demonstrating those parallel experiences, the different experiences, the experience of light at the same time that darkness is being cast, in order to allow the light to shine even further. And the Midrash, which speaks of God's ability to manipulate light in a way that will provide light for those who are faithful, for those who serve him, for those who are so chosen, and darkness for others. So that's just a brief journey through the traversing the sea of wisdom and the song of the sea, and trying to make a little bit of sense out of I think a very rich and interesting story. Any questions, concerns, complaints, comments, reflections?
What about not light and not dark, in between?
That's a whole other lecture. What about the in between? What about in between? Yeah, I mean, you're right. We are dealing in polar opposites. We're not dealing in gray, and that's a good question. It's a good question.
I'll make a comment on the concept and its limitations as I see it. On the macro scale, our survival then at the sea and through so many threats does seem miraculous. It's astounding that we survive as a nation. And on the other hand, there's such a price to be paid at the micro level. There's so much suffering along the way that all those who didn't make it, I find it troubling. It's a fact of our existence. Here we are. We should be thankful. We're the survivors. But what a painful history we've had. That's to me. Those two things just exist in parallel as a fact of life for a Jew.
Absolutely. I think at a certain point, to make the claims that we are making in this class, you have to be detached a little bit from the suffering that exists at every point of salvation and saving. And I'd say even on both sides, it's one thing to talk about light and darkness, but as the Midrashim are very sensitive to, we're also, how could the angels sing a song when God's creations are drowning in the sea, right? There still is the aspect of tragedy, even though they enslaved us, even though they oppressed us, even though there are enemies, they still are God's creations, and we don't celebrate that kind of suffering, that kind of death. So there is that, and there's also, I think more powerfully our own suffering, and that's an excellent point. I think you do have to take a step back and say, okay, what does it mean to have survived as a people this long? And anytime we make that statement, we're not ignoring, but we're putting aside the 6 million who did not survive, or putting aside those who suffered immensely throughout the generations, putting aside the victims of terror as recently as this past week. I mean, you have to put that aside for a moment to make these big statements about the survival of the Jewish people. You also have to acknowledge that there were those who didn't survive, and that's part of our experience and part of the tragedy of it. You're right about that. We don't have a perfect record of survival, but in the big picture, we're still here, and Baruch Hashem for that. But never to ignore the individuals. So that's an excellent point. Thank you, David Sakachevsky. We're going to say you're muted.
Unmute. There we go. Sorry. I wanted to bring up, I mean, and not to study now, but just to point out that, just a little bit further along in the story, Joshua takes the Jews into the Holy Land, and he also splits the sea. Well, he splits the river.
Mm-hmm.
But again, they walk through, and he only does it on one side and not on two sides. And there's nobody chasing us, and there's no clouds of glory. But another interesting parallel to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. I did not look. I'd be interested to look at the language there to see if any of these ideas are relevant in that chapter of the story when we see these themes repeat themselves again. That's a great point, and maybe
Class.
For another time. And I'm acknowledging as well. I think probably I shouldn't say every. I shouldn't speak for others, but many rabbis and yeshiva students' limitations when it comes to the part of the Torah known as Nach, which is the book of Joshua, which you're describing, and all of the books after that. We spend a lot of time on the Parasha, we spend a lot of time on the 5 books of Moses, but in yeshiva, the prophets are not a typical part of the curriculum in terms of in-depth studies. So my own familiarity with what you're mentioning, of course I know it and I've read it, but my depth of understanding is just not there because I haven't spent the time with the book of Joshua that I probably should. So thank you for that reminder. Beautiful.
Sure.
Okay, we're going to close with that, as our time together is up for this week, and looking forward to moving onward and upward next week. And stay warm and stay healthy and all of that. Hope to see you in Shul if you're able to make it.
Shabbat.
There for Shabbat Shabbat.
Thank you, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Long underwear.
Warm in Israel.
And if
No, it's not. It's freezing here.
I know.
Not today. Today is warm outside. I just came
Well,
out.
yeah, but it's been raining for 3 days. I don't know how warm it is.
Thank you.
I'm
You
freezing.
will.
Bye-bye.
Go to Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you.